Okay, today we are breaking down titanium bolts. So they look cool, they're lighter, they cost a small fortune, but they have their place on motorcycles. And in this video, we're just going to cover some really quick pros and cons on it and things you need to know when installing titanium in various places on a bike. We'll talk about the weight savings really quick. We'll talk about some of the colors. And then of course, there's going to be some links in the description for you. If you guys are interested in picking up some titanium bolts, I'll show you how to size them as well with a little tool that makes things very easy. So with that being said, let's get over to the bench. So the bench, we have a couple of different bolts here. We've got a standard issue BMW 8mm bolt that we use pretty much throughout the bikes. And I've seen this on the adventure bike side of things. That's where a lot of my experiences, we get a lot of bike builds that I've done, in addition to this guy, the Kove Rally Pro, which has all of the titanium hardware on it in a lot of different places. So the reason we're talking about this, and this has recently happened, is that I've been seeing more titanium bolts where the stigma of they break all the time keeps coming up. So first, let's talk about the weight savings, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the cons and the how-tos. So you have your standard issue 8mm bolt. You guys can see the scale there, 14 grams. The same bolt, now mind you that the head is a little bit different, but achieves the same thing. These are interchangeable. I have them on my F900 for the suspension clamp bolts. So it's the same bolt, same length. So you saw that 14 grams there, 7 grams there. So roughly half the weight. Now, if there was a little more material on the head, if it was an identical bolt, I bet it would be a little bit closer in weight, but you know, it's the weight savings thing. So that is used throughout the bike, different pinch bolts on the suspension, the triple clamps. You'll find that 8mm bolt in a lot of different places. The other one is the typical body screw. So this is a windshield screw for an F900 GS, and we'll do that, put it on the scale. We got 4 grams there. This is the titanium equivalent that I picked up. We're going to be 2 grams there. So you think, well, oh wow, 2 grams, what is that going to do? I mean, that's, you know, well, when you have companies like Porsche that on certain high performance models, they're using stickers instead of emblems just to save weight. This is kind of the same thing. It's not about this one bolt that's going to do it. It's 50 something bolts, 60 something bolts that are going to do it. Now, where are you going to notice it more? I would think you're going to notice it more on the steering components, making everything as light as possible, as that way it's less weight on the bars, less fatigue. Now, as recreational riders, are we going to notice it? No, but it looks cool. So that's the weight savings on it. And you know, you can get a bunch of cool colors and stuff like that. And like I said, I'll leave the links in the description. But one of the most important parts, there's two parts to know about this. One is, oh no, the list keeps growing. 3 parts. One is the shear strength. Although these are lighter, they are not actually stronger. There are different grades of titanium. Some have a higher tensile strength or a higher strength than other grades. But it's important to note that a titanium bolt will fail before the steel bolt given the same application and if the grades aren't correct. But in general, you should think of it that way. Next is a little thing called cold welding and galvanic corrosion. Big words. Anyway, the reason anti-seize was created is for stuff like that. So one of the biggest things that I've noticed around the shop is we will get, or I will see bolts that are titanium. It looks trick, they're blue, they're all over these bikes. But the problem is that these things will cold weld themselves onto the steel. It is a reaction that the metal has, the dissimilar metals, And especially if you wash them, especially if you're around salt water and stuff like that, it's going to speed up the process. Now, titanium, yes, is more corrosion resistant than some bolts. Like, you know, you have a stainless steel bolt. This is very similar to that. But under pressure, it does grow a little bit. And that growth plus the growth of the other piece equals a seized bolt. So in preventing that, that's where you need to make sure on these applications you're using some kind of anti-seize. So not only are you using anti-seize on the threads, but you also want to pay close attention to the mating surface of the bolt. So if this bolt is going to come in contact with aluminum and it's going to sit there, you can actually put a little bit of anti-seize on there as well to help it. Because I've seen where, and if you've seen sprocket bolts, sometimes people will put thread lock on the actual mating surface, not just the threads, but the mating surface of that bolt. And that's to help lock that part in as well. Well, it's the same thing here. You want to make sure you put some anti-seize on the face of it just to make sure it will break free easily. So that is what you use, some kind of anti-seize. There's copper, there's nickel, there's a few different versions of it. You know, somebody has a tin like I do that's, you know, 6 years old. I've used half of it, and you know, yeah, it's an absolute mess. There are different types of thread compounds that'll help with that. BMW has their own, Castrol has it. Again, Permatex is probably one of the more widely available ones, but use something. You want to make sure you're using something. Now, one of the last tips that I have on this and that you should know is that any kind of thread lubricant, so that could literally be an anti-seize, that could literally be thread lock, which eventually actually locks the threads in, will change the friction the bolt experiences in those threads. When you torque one of these bolts dry, there's a certain calculated friction in there. So if the manual tells you it's a suspension triple clamp, like on the BMWs, not on the Kove, but on the BMWs, it's 19 Newton meters. The pinch bolts for the front axle are 19 Newton meters, and then the pinch bolts for all of the triple clamps are all going to be 19 Newton meters. Once you put a lubricant, you lose that friction. That friction is what causes the torque wrench basically to go off. So what ends up happening is that because of that lubricant, the torque wrench goes to 19 Newton meters, but you were actually able to basically screw this in further, effectively increasing the clamping force. So 19 Newton meters dry is not the same as 19 Newton meters lubricated. So you need to be careful about that when you're installing these bolts. And there are charts out there, there's different stuff, but you need to be very, very careful because you can easily over tighten the particular component, especially the lower triple clamp on suspension. If you over tighten that, it tweaks the fork, and then that fork will not flow smoothly through that part of the travel. So you need to be very careful about that. You need to take a look at it. In my particular case, with my particular application, I actually backed it up about 2 or 3 Newton meters because I knew that these things were screwing in further and increasing the clamping force because the thread was lubricated. So you need to watch out for that when you go to install this kind of stuff. You need to keep that in mind. Does not mean that everything has to obey that, but you do want to watch out for that, especially if you're screwing into sensitive things like aluminum. You know, steel's not so bad, but use thread lock, know your torque values, make sure you know what you're doing there, and not going to over tighten or bind something because you're expecting the torque value to be the same with lubrication on the threads. So let's take a look over in the tool drawer, and I have a couple of them. Ignore the mess. This is a professional setup. There's going to be a link in the description for one of these. So this is the final parting. I wanted to show you guys something like this. I got this from our local hardware store. We've got a Baba bolt here in San Diego, but you can find these at Marshall's and a bunch of Marshall's hardware at a bunch of different hardware shops. I'll leave a link in the description below so you guys can get yourselves one of these. This is probably one of the handiest tools in the garage that I own, other than a torque wrench, because torque values are important. And what this does is this allows you to find out what thread a bolt is, and then also what the length is. So very important, especially if you're going to be purchasing any of these titanium bolts, you need to match up the threads. You need to make sure that these things are close together. So in this case, you want to go flange to flange. You can see that they're the same length, and then the thread is the same. So all of these things, you don't want to spend a bunch of money on a bolt that you can't use once you finally get it. So this is a thread gauge. You have your standard at the bottom, you have your metric up here on top. So it's just as easy as you go down the line until the bolt falls in. That tells me it's an 8mm bolt. Then you want to find the length. Now, screws like this, that would be considered like a cap, socket head cap screw, something along those lines. This style bolt that's not countersunk, you measure from the flat end down. So this is a 25mm long bolt. It's a 8mm diameter, 25mm long. And then the most important part is the thread pitch. So you flip this thing over, and then you have your different thread pitches: 70, 75, 10, 125, 18, or 15, excuse me. So I know that this one is a 125, and it's going to be tricky to see it on the camera, but you basically present the bolt and you'll see that all the threads line up on there exactly. This one you can see none of these go in or lock in until I get to the 125. So that's the easiest way to figure it out. Now I know exactly what this bolt is. It's a 8x125, 25mm long. You can do the same thing with these guys. This is a 5mm bolt. It is 15mm long, and then it is going to be a 7.5, I believe. No. Some of these get really tricky and hard to see. So this is going to be 0.75, I believe. Yeah, so again, be patient with this, but every toolbox, if you're dealing with hardware, should have one of these to identify a bolt properly, and then that way you know you're going to be using the same thing. It could do the nuts, but a lot of the stuff that we do on motorcycles basically is going into some kind of threaded hole. We're not really using any kind of nylox and hardware like that. We do in a lot of places, but not every hole. There's more things that go into holes that are already cut with thread and are ready to basically use. So I don't use the nut side of these things very often, but I use this all the time. Basically everywhere I'm spending any kind of time, I have a couple of these at work, have a couple different ones here in the garage. These are absolutely handy. So if you don't have a thread gauge, you need to pick yourself up one. They're in the description for you. So recap, titanium bolts, use anti-seize. Watch how much you torque them down once you put anti-seize on there. And then note that they do save a little bit of weight. They've got some pretty bitchin' colors out there for you. And it's just a matter of finding your bolts, picking them out, and I guess enjoying the weight savings. I don't know. What do you guys think? So questions, comments, things like that in the description. We will be making some more videos here in the garage. I got a couple of more ideas, and then we're also going to get into some rally stuff because, well, this is basically a rally bike. So it should be able to go out and do rallies on it, or maybe. I don't know. All right. We'll see you guys for the next video. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. See ya.